Do you know what gravity and time look like when they are compressed into a singularity? Well, the light it produces is too much for the human eye and brain to process. So, unless you're a higher being, then you can't know what that looks like. But I came close. Hello, my name is Brody, and I'm not your average high school senior. I'm a gymnast, a really good one, actually. People like to throw around the word prodigy or future Olympian when they talk about me. And yeah, it's kind of the plan. Gymnastics are my life. Well, mostly. I don't have a ton of friends, but I do have Adam. He's been in my life for as long as I can remember. We both grew up in Reading, where nothing ever changes except the seasons. Adam's good at gymnastics too, though he's never been able to match me. Not that it bothers him, or at least he doesn't let it show. Adam's one of those people who's just good. Good at being kind. Good at seeing the best in everyone. Good at being the one person I can count on. It's probably why I could never be with him. I'm gay, sure, but I've always felt like being with Adam would destroy his innocence somehow. He doesn't deserve someone as messed up as me, and I'd never forgive myself if I hurt him. So I keep my distance. I don't really think about real guys much anyway. Most of the time my mind is on someone else. Someone who isn't even real, or at least I don't think he is. I've been dreaming of him for as long as I can remember. The same man, always there, always watching. When I was younger, he seemed young too, like he was growing up alongside me. But as I got older, so did he. Now he looks like he's in his 20s, strong, tall, perfect. But there's something off about him, like he's pretending to be human when he's not. He never speaks to me, not once, but there's a connection I can't explain. And we never meet in a warm, inviting place. Instead, I dreamt of him in a small, dark room, somewhere uninviting, somewhere I didn't much care for. I've thought about him more times than I care to admit. I don't tell anyone, not even Adam, especially not Adam. Dreams are dreams, right? But sometimes when I wake up, I swear it feels like he's still there, lingering just out of reach. I've always known there was something different about me, not just with gymnastics, though that's where it shows the most, but something deeper. People think it's just talent, a gift, but they don't know the truth. Not even Adam. When I was around 10, I started noticing I could do things other people couldn't. During a routine one day, I felt like I was falling wrong, like my body wasn't going to make the landing. And then it was as if the world stretched for a split second, bending around me, just enough to let me land perfectly on my feet. At first, I thought I imagined it. But the more it happened, the more I realized it wasn't just luck. I could bend the laws of physics, not for long, just for the tiniest fraction of a second, maybe 100th. But that's all I needed. It wasn't like flying or anything dramatic. It was subtle. A little extra stretch when I needed it, a rotation that defied gravity for just a moment longer than it should. Enough to give me an edge. I kept it to myself. I mean, who would believe me? Even Adam would think I was crazy. And besides, it wasn't like I could control it at first. It would just happen. Over time, though, I learned to tap into it, to use it when I needed it. The weird thing was, every time I did it, I'd dream of him, the man. It was like a reward, though I didn't understand why. In those dreams, he'd just be there, watching, still silent, still perfect. Adam started noticing. Not the dreams, obviously, but the way I moved during practice. "How do you do it?" he asked me once after I stuck a vault that no one else on the team could even attempt. His voice wasn't jealous, just curious, amazed. "I guess I'm just flexible," I said, brushing it off. He narrowed his eyes at me, the way he always did when he knew I was hiding something. "No one's that flexible, Brody." The others noticed too. They didn't say anything outright, but I'd catch them watching me during practice, whispering when they thought I couldn't hear. The questions were always there, hanging in the air. Was I on steroids? Performance enhancers? What was my secret? I didn't tell them, obviously. How could I? It wasn't just my reputation on the line, it was everything. But the more I used my power, the more it felt like something was watching me. Not just the man in my dreams. Something else. Something bigger. I couldn't put it into words, but it was there, lingering on the edge of every moment I bent reality. And even though I didn't know what it was, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was tempting something I wasn't ready to face. The first time I came close to fully breaking the rules, I was in the gym after hours, alone except for Adam. He stayed late to work on his routine, and I was fine-tuning mine for the upcoming competition. It started as a normal practice, flipping, stretching, the usual. But something inside me felt different, like I was on the edge of something new. It happened during a tumbling pass. I launched into a triple backflip, and for the briefest moment, I felt weightless, like time had stopped. My body twisted in ways it shouldn't have, faster and tighter than physics would allow. When I landed, the mat didn't even seem to absorb my weight. "Brody," Adam said, his voice sharp. I looked up to see him staring at me, his face pale. "What the hell was that?" "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to play dumb, but my heart was racing. "You didn't just land that," he said, stepping closer. I don't even know how to explain it. You shouldn't have been able to do that. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said, brushing him off. "Don't worry about it." But he did worry. Adam always worried about me. That night I dreamt of the man again. Only this time it was different. The dream lasted longer than usual, and he wasn't just standing there. He moved, walking closer to me. His expression was unreadable, but his presence felt heavier, more real. I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding. Over the next few weeks I kept pushing myself, testing my limits. Bending the rules became easier, almost second nature. Adam noticed. He always noticed. "You're going to hurt yourself," he told me one day after practice. His voice was soft, but there was an edge to it, a frustration I hadn't heard before. "You're risking everything. For what? To win? To impress people who don't even care about you?" "I don't need them to care," I said, avoiding his eyes. "I just need to be the best." He shook his head, his disappointment cutting deeper than I wanted to admit. "You don't have to do this to be the best, Brody. You already are." But he didn't understand. How could he? Every time I did the impossible, I felt invincible. And every time I dreamt of the man, those dreams felt like proof I was doing something right, even if I didn't fully understand what. Still, the more I pushed, the more Adam pulled away. I told myself it didn't matter. He'd come around eventually. He always did. Deep down, I knew I was losing him, and for the first time, I wondered if I was losing something else, too. Something I couldn't afford to lose. It all came to a head after practice one Friday. I'd just finished a routine that left the rest of the team staring, their mouths half open in disbelief. It wasn't just a good performance. It was impossible, even by my own standards. I knew I had gone too far. The gym was silent except for the faint squeak of sneakers against the mat as Adam walked toward me. The rest of the team stayed back, watching like they were waiting for something to explode. "Brody," Adam said, his voice low but steady, "we need to talk. Now." "Not now," I muttered, grabbing my water bottle and turning away. "Yes, now," he snapped, louder than I'd ever heard him before. His voice carried across the gym, and the others exchanged nervous glances. "Adam, seriously, let it go," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, but my hands were trembling. "No," he said, stepping in front of me. "I'm not letting this go. We're all worried about you, Brody. Something's off. You're not normal. And I don't mean your talent, I mean you." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. I could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on me, pressing down like gravity. "What are you even saying?" I asked, trying to sound annoyed, but the crack in my voice gave me away. "Are you taking something?" Adam asked, his voice breaking. "Enhancers, drugs, anything? Just tell me the truth." "No," I said sharply, glaring at him. "You think I'd risk everything like that? I don't need drugs, Adam." Then what is it? He demanded, because whatever you're doing, it's not human. I froze, the words hitting me harder than I expected. He wasn't accusing me. He was scared for me. I could see it in his eyes, but I couldn't tell him. How could I explain something I barely understood myself? Forget it, I muttered, shoving past him. Brody, stop! Adam's voice cracked, and for a second I thought he might grab my arm, but he didn't. He just stood there watching as I walked away. The team didn't say anything, they didn't have to. Their silence said it all. I was no longer one of them. That night I stayed late long after everyone else had left. I needed to clear my head to remind myself why I was doing this. Halfway through a routine, I felt it again. That pull, that surge of power. This time it was different. I launched into the air, twisting and spinning faster than I'd ever thought possible. The world seemed to blur around me, bending and stretching as if it were made of rubber. When I landed, the gym felt wrong. The air was too still, too heavy. My head throbbed with a pain so sharp it nearly knocked me over. I turned to the bleachers and saw Adam standing there, his arms crossed, his face a mix of anger and hurt. I hadn't even noticed he'd stayed behind. "You're going to kill yourself," he said, his voice cold and flat. I opened my mouth to respond, but he didn't wait for an answer. He turned and walked out, leaving me alone in the empty gym. Surely he'd come around eventually, right? But as I sat there clutching my head and trying to ignore the ache that pulsed through my skull, I wasn't so sure anymore. For the first time, I wondered if I was pushing too far, if I'd already gone past the point of no return. Saturday came faster than I wanted it to. The competition was the biggest of the season, a packed gymnasium filled with hundreds of spectators, teammates, coaches, and judges. I could feel the pressure in every cell of my body, a weight pressing down on my chest. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind of electric buzz that always came before something monumental. But for me, it was more than just nerves. It was the knowledge that I was going to push myself again, further than I ever had before. This time I wasn't sure if I'd come back from it. The routines began, one gymnast after another stepping up to show their skills. They were good. Great even. But I wasn't paying attention. My mind was on my own performance, my fingers itching with the need to prove something. To who, I wasn't sure anymore. When it was my turn, the gym fell silent. Everyone knew my name, knew my reputation. They expected perfection, and I intended to give it to them. I stepped onto the mat, took a deep breath, and began. The first half of my routine was flawless, smooth and precise. Applause erupted from the crowd, but I barely heard it. I could feel the pull inside me, the temptation to do more, to go beyond what anyone else could. When I launched into the final tumbling pass, I let go. Time slowed. The world around me froze, the roar of the crowd fading into silence. My body moved with an impossible fluidity, defying gravity, defying everything. I wasn't just bending the rules, I was rewriting them. And then I saw him, a man who shouldn't have been there. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with something I couldn't name. The man walked toward me, his movements slow and deliberate. And we were back again in that small, dark room. Before I could demand answers, he spoke. "You can call me John," he said, his voice low and steady. I stared at him, unable to speak. "I've been watching you for a long time, Brody," he continued. "Longer than you've been alive." What are you talking about?" I stammered. He smiled faintly, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You've felt it, haven't you? The pull, the power. It's not yours, and yet you've been taking it as if it belongs to you." "I don't—" "Stop," he said, raising a hand. His voice was calm, but the air around him seemed to hum with energy. "This isn't a punishment, Brody. It's a warning." "A warning?" I echoed, my voice barely above a whisper. John nodded. "You're playing with forces you don't understand. Forces that hold this world and all worlds together. Every time you push the limits, you risk tearing apart something far bigger than yourself." I felt a lump rise in my throat. "But I don't mean to hurt anyone. I just wanted to be the best." His gaze softened just slightly. Sometimes the greatest power is holding light in your hands and choosing not to use it. You've been given a gift, but it's not meant for this. If you keep going, Brody, you'll destroy yourself. Like I said, it's not a punishment, it's just how nature corrects its wounds, how it remains perfect. I swallowed hard, the weight of his words crashing down on me. Why me? Because you're loved, he said simply. By forces you can't even begin to understand. But love doesn't grant you immunity from the consequences of your actions. The air seemed to shimmer around him as he took a step back. This is your final warning. Stop, or there will be nothing left of you. Nothing left of any of this. And then he was gone. We were back at the school and no longer in that small, dark room. Before I could catch my breath, time resumed. The crowd erupted into applause, but I barely heard it. My legs felt like jelly as I walked off the mat, my head spinning with what had just happened. Adam was waiting for me by the lockers, his face pale but his eyes wide with concern. Brody, he said softly, are you okay? I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the pull. I didn't feel the need to prove anything. No, I admitted. But I want to be. He didn't say anything, just pulled me into a hug. For the first time, I let myself lean into him, into the safety of his arms. For the first time, I felt like maybe I didn't have to be perfect. After that day, everything changed. I didn't touch the power again, I didn't dare. The memory of John, his calm voice, his piercing gaze, and the weight of his words stayed with me. I couldn't forget what he had said or the warning he had left me with. Sometimes the greatest power is holding light in your hands and choosing not to use it. That next week I competed like any other gymnast. No shortcuts, no bending, just hard work and heart. I landed my routines with precision, and while I didn't win first place, I still placed. The crowd cheered for me as loudly as ever, but this time I didn't crave their applause. For once, it didn't matter if I was the best. The real victory came when I saw Adam waiting for me afterward. He stood by the bleachers, his arms loose at his sides, a soft smile tugging at the corner of his lips. It wasn't the forced politeness I'd gotten used to since we'd stopped talking. It was real. I approached him, my heart hammering in my chest. Hey, I said, my voice tentative. Hey, he replied. There was a moment of silence, the kind that usually made me squirm, but this time I let it linger. It was Adam who broke it. I saw your routine, he said, his voice steady. You were amazing. I blinked at him, his words sinking in. I'm sorry, Adam, I said, the apology spilling out of me. For everything, for shutting you out, for ignoring you, for thinking I had to do this all alone. Adam's smile softened and he stepped closer. You don't have to do it alone, Brody. You never did. I've been here the whole time. I always will be. His words hit me like a punch to the gut, but in the best way. For so long I'd carried this weight, this need to be perfect, to be untouchable. I thought that was the only way to survive, the only way to matter. But here was Adam showing me that I didn't have to carry it anymore. Does this mean you'll forgive me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Adam let out a small laugh. I forgave you a long time ago. Without thinking, I pulled him into a hug. He didn't hesitate, wrapping his arms around me like it was the most natural thing in the world. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I let myself breathe. The weeks turned into months and the pressure to perform eased. I trained hard but without shortcuts, without bending the rules. And slowly, I felt lighter, freer. Adam and I grew closer and I didn't know how much I wanted him to be closer until he was. The Olympics were still on the horizon, but they no longer consumed me. Gymnastics was part of my life, not all of it. I found joy in the small things again. Late-night talks with Adam, the way the sky turned pink at sunset, the feeling of landing a routine with nothing but my own strength. Sometimes I thought about John, about his warning, and the glimpse he'd given me of a world much larger than my own. But more often I thought about Adam, about the life we were building together, one day at a time. I didn't need to be perfect anymore. I just needed to be me. And that, I realized, was enough.